now is just turn it over to you guys. I'd like to answer your questions on any topic, any subject matter, and we'll do Q&A.
Senator, in the last couple of days, there's obviously been some major offensives going on in Afghanistan, and those obviously play into precisely the argument you're making. Loss of interpreters, loss of Arabic language speakers. What leverage do they give you now to go back to the undecided, or to go back to the White House with a request for more support?
I think it gives us every bit of leverage in the world. We have 2 wars. We have terrorism on every front. We had the Christmas Day bomb attempt. We need all of our best and brightest. Why limit the armed services to straight members? Why? Why? Why would you do that? Why would you want to limit some of the talent and the strength and the greatness of all the Americans who want to serve in the military? And we will be able to recruit even that much more if we repeal this policy. How many people would love to be serving right now but don't dare do it because they won't be able to be honest about who their spouse is and who their loved ones are? And so I think this is going to be an opportunity, and I think the tide is changing. So I'm very optimistic. Thank you.
Senator, where do you stand on filibuster reform? Do you support the Harkin legislation?
Reform it.
Do you want to get rid of it?
Oh, yeah, I think there are some ideas for reform that should be considered that I think are worthy of consideration. And the filibuster is a relatively new procedural tactic in the history of America. It's not like it was in the founding fathers' requirements for the Senate. It just wasn't. And so I think it's been abused. I think the amount of times that have required a supermajority and filibuster has been implemented have really undermined the ability of the Senate to get business done. So I think now is the time for a very full conversation on reforming the filibuster.
Do you have a specific?
Well, there's a couple of ideas. Tom, you'd all had an idea that I thought was very interesting. Some people want to reduce it to 55. Some people want to limit when it can be used. Another idea is when they want to filibuster, make them filibuster. Make them talk till 4 in the morning about why we don't support health care reform. So I like all those ideas. I think we should consider all of them because what's happening now is not acceptable. And it is not adequate for the United States government to be stymied in getting anything done.
One of the things that I'm most concerned about with some of the proposals for Don't Ask, Don't Tell are trying to stretch out its, repeal like over a long period of time. And all the people who are pro-segregation were doing the same gradualist strategy after Brown versus Board, saying that it's in the black community's best interest to do it gradually over 10, 20, 30 years. So what can we do so we don't allow the people who want to wait until we have a Republican in the White House or the Senate's different and are using the stall tactic to make sure it doesn't happen?
Right. Well, what I'm concerned is some of the questions at the hearing were focused on this year-long wait. I don't want to wait a year. I think that's a mistake. I think it's fine for the military to take the year to figure out how they're going to implement the change. There's going to be a lot of questions. What do you do with family members who don't necessarily want to live next to a gay family? Should there be any, can they object to it? Is there any recourse? Is there anything that you need to do with someone who now no longer wants to serve because people are openly gay? So they just have to figure out what their answers are to those questions. And that's fine. They can take a year to do that. It doesn't mean we have to wait a year to repeal the policy. I don't want one more service member to be forced to leave the military because of this policy. And I think it's important. I think it's very important that we not, soften this and say, well, there's more humane ways to implement the policy. We have to get rid of the policy. It is corrosive and destructive. It needs to be repealed. Now, there's a couple of ways we can repeal it. We could do a moratorium. We could do a full repeal. We could do a number of procedural changes that stop the bleeding. And so I would support any of those that gets us there quickest. It's very important that we stop dismissing men and women because they're gay, period.
First, I'd like to thank you for personally signing a letter to Harry Reid about the public option. I was wondering, what do you think are the chances that we're going to go reconciliation with the public option and finally get a real health care plan for the millions of Americans who need it? And what can you ask from us to ensure that we can really pressure Congress to getting a public option and stop the abuses from these insurance companies that are exploiting millions of working men and women in this country?
I think there is hope. What I think might happen is, through reconciliation, you could do anything that's budget related, but it has to be budget related. So something like Medicare could be adjusted through reconciliation. What I wanted to see is I wanted to see a Medicare for all approach. I wanted to see us opening up Medicare for anyone to buy in at a rate they can afford, 5%, 6%, 7% of income, something like that. Now, if we don't feel we can get 51 votes for a complete opening of Medicare to everyone, I think one compromise could be opening up Medicare for the 55 to 65-year-olds. And the reason why I think that's a real possibility is because we had an agreement to get 60 votes on that in the negotiations of the Senate bill before Lieberman changed his mind. So we had 59 votes to support that. So I also know that it will be a home run in the House because people want to just see, if you open up Medicare for people to buy in, Medicare is a 3% overhead, it's fairly efficient, it's got some problems with reimbursement rates that you could fix. But let's try to open it up, demonstrate it works, and then you could get to the Medicare for all far quicker. So that is why I think, go for the gold, go for Medicare for all. If you can't get the 51 votes for that, then go for 55 to 65, because that's the baby boom generation right now, and they are very much in need right now. They are often denied coverage because of pre-existing conditions. They often have chronic disease setting on, so you want to get them into preventive care now to make them healthier, lower their costs long term. So it's a particularly important group that are often dropped from insurance, and often people in the 55 to 65 branch, they stay in a job because it has health care when they don't want to. So sometimes they'd like to retire, sometimes they'd like to start a small business, they'd like to do chapter number 2, and so we need to make that possible. And if you had the Medicare for all option, it would make a huge difference. So that's my strategy. And I wrote a letter on that today to Harry Reid. So what you can do is lobby. Just keep, letters to Harry Reid, emails, blog about it, get some momentum in the online communities. I think that's really important.
Please continue to fight for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership, Senator. I have a question. I have a brother and sister that are in active service in the military. My sister's on her 5th tour of duty in Iraq. But they are strong supporters of the
Hold it down
careers.
back, please! Hold it down!
They're just having fun. They're having fun. It's okay.
We're strong supporters of the queer community, and what I hear from Republicans is they're not convinced that the rank and file in the military are ready for openly queer folks to serve. So what is your strategy about engaging enlisted men and women who are allies, who have brothers and sisters that are queer, who are supportive of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell? How are you going to get those voices